Tū katoa. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Dunedin City Council. Welcome to councillors, to staff and to the public. Councillors, we'll move on to the meeting proper. And I've come to apologies. I'll move from the chair that we accept the apologies from Councillor Elder for absence, Councillor Newell for lateness, but he's here, and Councillor Gary for early departure. Seconded Councillor Staines. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. I'll move item 4, that Council confirms the public part of the agenda with the following alterations in regard to Standing Order 2.1, Option C being adopted as in the order paper. Seconded Councillor Staines. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 5, declarations of interest. I'll move that Council notes or amends, if there are any amendments to the declarations of interest. There being none, then I'll move Council notes the elected members' interest register attached as attachment A and confirms the proposed management plan for elected members' interests. It's moved. Second, Councillor Staines. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And I'll move that Council notes the executive leadership team's interest register attached as attachment A. Second to Councillor Staines. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. On to confirmation of minutes. I'll move that the Council confirms the public part of the minutes of the ordinary Council meeting held on the 13th of August 2018 is a correct record. Second to Councillor Staines. Any discussion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Minutes of committees. Item 7, Infrastructure Services. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. May I move that the Council notes the minutes of the Infrastructure Services and Networks Committee meeting held on the 13th of August 2018.
Seconded Councillor O'Malley. Any discussion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 8, Economic Development. Councillor Staines.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that the Council notes the minutes of the Economic Development Committee meeting held on the 10th of July 2018, and B, takes part C items of the minutes of the Economic Development Committee held on Tuesday the 10th of July 2018 in the non-public part of the meeting.
Second to Councillor Gary. Any discussion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 9, Community and Culture. Councillor Hawkins.
Tēnā Your Worship. I'll move that the Council notes Part A, items 1 to 13 and public forum of the minutes of the Community and Culture meeting held on 14 August 2018 and further takes Part C, items of the minutes of that same meeting in the non-public part of this one.
Second to Councillor Laufiso. Any discussion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 10, Planning and Environment Committee. Councillor Benson Pope.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that Council notes the minutes of the Planning and Environment Committee held on 14 August 2018.
Second to Councillor Steadman. Any discussion? Put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, item 11, Hearings Committee. Is Councillor Wilson, are you moving this, or I'm just not sure. Seconded. Councillor Hall. Discussion. Put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Councillor Wiley, you're doing your usual job lot.
Yes, Your Worship. I move that Council notes the Community Board minutes 12 through to 17.
Seconded. Councillor O'Malley. Any discussion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, on to the reports. Item 18, the Logan Park Artificial Turf Update. Welcome, Ms Mash, Mr West, Ms Ethan. Good afternoon. Do you wish to preface with any comments, or do you want to go straight to questions?
Through the chair, just to note on page 34, there was a typo. In our summary of considerations, the financial considerations should have read 550,000, not the 750 that's there.
Thank you. Questions, Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. Two questions. One is around the ongoing maintenance, and my assumption is that the maintenance of this facility is a specialist skill to have. Is it a capacity that we have existing within the team, or are we intending to manage that maintenance externally?
Whilst it is specialist, the team in our ops in Parks and Rec, Councillor Hawkins, are looking at how we're going to manage that moving forward, but we'll be using our contractors as we use for other facilities, Parks and Rec. So the answer is yes, we'll be using current and existing structures and organisations to do that.
And just secondly, on the associated works, was that always in the work programme, or has that funding been rescheduled or reprioritised from amenity upgrades elsewhere in the district?
So I guess as we've worked through the progress of this project, the realisation is that we have to look at the infrastructure surrounding the artificial turf once it's installed to support the overall usage of that facility and the wider Logan Park.
Is that a yes?
Through the chair, it's money that exists in the 18-19 budget, so tick. Was it foreseen at the very commencement of the process? Perhaps not, but without these attentions to lighting and pathways, we will just look like we're dropping something in the midst of it as opposed to having it integrated into the rest of Logan Park.
Councillor Vandervis.
My memory of the original $1 million decision to support this was that lighting was mentioned at the time, and that it was anticipated that extra fundraising would go in towards this. The question posed by Mr. Hawkins was also one that I'd put, perhaps a little more bluntly, and that was the extra $500,000 of associated works anticipated at the time that we made the $1 million decision? And we don't seem to have a lot of clarity quite yet with that.
Through the chair, in terms of the development of the thinking around the associated works, in response to what Ms Mash said around the fact that we can't just drop a artificial turf within Logan Park, what we've looked at is how we can realign existing operational budgets to, I guess, really integrate the facility as best we can within the park. There was a lot of discussion, the fact that the integrity of Logan Park needed to be maintained as much as possible through the design of the artificial turf. So it's an existing operational budgets that have been allocated to, I guess, improve the associated amenity immediately surrounding the park.
Just further to that, Councillor, the notion is correct that the Football South folks went off and did additional fundraising. So they did that earlier this year. And the works we're talking about are in paragraph 12 that relate to the reconfiguration of the cricket oval. So not the project per se, but the cricket oval next to.
Right, so the question then is that should we, or should staff at the time, have anticipated that the $1 million decision that we made also necessarily involved another $500,000 of associated works?
So to the best of my knowledge, these discussions were part of the overall Logan Park precinct plan, which then hasn't moved ahead, but these elements were recognised at officer level as a way to bring full effectiveness to this particular project and not to displace current users. So without being part of those discussions, I'm not sure to what scale, but as we've defined the project and redefined it, this is where we find ourselves.
Yep, I understand that. I'm looking forward, however, to the next $1 million that we're going to make a decision on. Will that agenda also have a wider view on the associated works that are going to be necessary to go with that? I understand that it's not clear whether that was really understood at the time, but can we have some assurance that we are going to look wider and have a bit more clarity in future for this kind of unanticipated expense?
Yes, we can.
Councillor Benson-Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In previous discussions of this proposal, there have been questions raised about the border treatment required to keep vehicles off, but not do much more. There's nothing I can see in the report that touches on that. Can you give us some information about what's proposed, please?
Through the chair, what we are aiming to do in terms of that point is use the proposed new tree planting to assist with ensuring that cars aren't able to drive onto the artificial turf. We have taken advice around the fact that the current tree stock also requires some additional arboricultural work, so the idea is that that additional tree planting will not only prevent cars driving onto the artificial turf, but will also sort of future-proof the existing trees that are there to enable growth. We were doing succession planning. There's no fence proposed around the whole of the artificial turf. There will, however, be some fences behind the goals, which is a requirement.
Councillor Gary.
My question's just been answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Malley.
I think you may have answered a lot of these questions, but I'm just going to rephrase it so we get a better understanding of the associated works and how they came back in. Is it true to say that they weren't in the original discussion because, in fact, at that point the Logan Park redevelopment was also being considered and therefore they were two separate identities, and now the Logan Park redevelopment is not going ahead? The general theme is that we would, as we do work down there, be looking to that master plan and doing our work consistent with that master plan so that as we develop these individually, we can work towards that as the outcome. Is that correct?
Sorry. Yes, that's the intention.
Councillor Hawkins, did you have another question?
Yeah, thank you. Just seeking assurance, I suppose, that the $550,000 budget for associated works, are any of the works proposed conditions of the consent?
No.
Thank you.
No further questions? Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. So I just want to get clarification. So when we look at the original $1 million that council has put forth, that's approximately 30% of the artificial turf of 3.7 million. So we've put in 30% roughly, and they've fundraised 70%. Okay, and then this additional 550,000 is actually more geared around cricket than it is football, so and more recreational use.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Further questions? Okay, would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor O'Malley, seconded. Councillor Wiley. Okay, you wish to speak to it, Councillor O'Malley? No. Other speakers? Oh, Councillor Wiley.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to applaud the work that Football South have done and to get it to this stage, because it has been a long process for them. And when we look at the standards of our football pitches, we've been fortunate to have a good winter in the sense of a lot of football. I don't think there's been a Saturday loss this year, which is a rarity. But the scope of what this will bring to town is going to be quite important. But I think the key that I look at is that you know, the 70%, approximately 70% that the football community have raised to get it here has to be commended, and I applaud them for that.
Okay. No further speakers. I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, team. Move on now to item 19, timeframe for notification of 2GP. Ms Johnson, Ms Pinfold, welcome. Would you like to introduce? Right, councillors, questions. Councillor Vanders. Councillor.
Regarding the first extension of time, when was the final commissioners' meeting?
Through the chair, what do you mean by commissioners' meeting? Do you mean a hearing, or do you mean a deliberation, or can you?
Hearing, deliberation, whatever. When did they finish?
Well, the hearings finished in December of last year, but the deliberations have continued since then, in the sense that they have had informal discussions trying to finalize the decisions, which are still going on. So the hearings members for different decisions are discussing amongst themselves and finalizing the wording of those decisions.
And these deliberative meetings have been going on, what, all year now, and are still going on?
I don't, I think you'd have to, the best person to answer this question is really the chair of the hearings panel, but my understanding is those conversations are still going on as they finalize the wording of their decision reports. I don't know that they're physically meeting, I don't think so, but I think they're still working together to finalize those decision reports.
Right. Do you remember when we agreed to extend the time frame for the 2GP by a whole year, that questions were asked at the time why it was to be a whole year, and that the answer given was that, well, you wanted to have plenty of time for deliberations to make sure that another extension wasn't required? Do you remember that being told to us by staff at the time?
Through the chair, I wasn't here for that report. That report was given by Paul Freeland in my absence, so I can't recall the questions that were asked at the time. I think he would have provided answers to the best of his ability based on what he knew at the time. Okay.
My memory, and it may be that my memory's faulty, but when I questioned this enormous extension of a year, and asked, you know, how long would the commissioners still have to meet, I was told that they would have to meet till the end of last year, and then that deliberations may take up to by the end of February. We are now many months past that. What changed? What has gone wrong with what was proposed in terms of a work stream, where we were told that this would be the one and only extension, that deliberations would be finished by February of this year, and here we are in August.
Councillor, can you finish your question, which you're repeating excessively, and let an answer be forthcoming? And the answer can be yes or no, basically.
I'm not sure, through the chair, I'm not sure what the question is.
The question is, what changed?
The
okay.
Chief Executive will answer the question.
The commissioners have not finished their deliberations. They've needed to take more time, and they've taken that time.
So my question really is why, and why so many months of more time?
As Dr Johnson said, that would be a question for the chair of the hearings panel, but he's not here.
Who is the chair of the hearing?
David Collins.
David Collins.
Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins. Are you happy to move? Right, okay. Any further questions? Right, we've got a mover. Is there a seconder? Seconder, Councillor Staines. Councillor Hawkins, do you wish to speak to councillors? Any other speakers? Councillor Vanderbilt.
I'm very unhappy that this process has continued and has continued for much longer than was anticipated. The claim that, or the reason that we agreed to the first extension of time was, I believe, certainly poorly informed. And the reason that we are legally able to continue with yet another extension apparently is that there are no clearly identifiable persons who are directly affected. We may legally be entitled to, but in an email from at least Mr. Alan Dippy, certainly I believe he feels personally affected, and I suggest that he isn't the only one. I think that the extended nature of deliberations over and above what was anticipated from February through to now has not been justifiable, and that the claim that we now have at the end of this extension, that we need another extension, that it's simply not possible to do it within the original time frame. Given that we already had a year's extension on the time frame, I think, quite frankly, is quite difficult to follow. What really upsets me, though, is a bit of political wisdom, if you could call it that, which says that if you want to get something through into the public domain that is really awkward or really distasteful, the time to do it is just before Christmas, when everybody is too busy or too preoccupied to actually do anything about it. This particular extension that we are now being asked to call on does exactly that. It puts the 2GP out into the public domain just before Christmas. In my time on council since 2004, I have seen this happen time and time again to things which I have found to be really, really awkward, things that I've voted against, things that I've tried to get changed unsuccessfully. And arranging timing so that it can happen just before Christmas, to me, is something which I have brought up before and I'm bringing up again now because this seems to be the case in point here. I'm not claiming that it's been deliberate, but I am saying that in terms of us being transparent and in terms of us as an organisation giving the public fair notice, that this timing is really, really unfair on the public in terms of being able to respond to what is a particularly prescriptive and particularly, if you like, revolutionary second generation plan. The amount of time that deliberation has taken, I was told wouldn't exceed February of this year. I'm assuming that costs, which I asked about at the time, have continued to escalate as a result of these extended times. And I see this extended time again, although I'm assured by our acting chief executive that it's absolutely necessary, it's still something I wish to vote against on the basis that it's not defensible in terms of the overall timing, what was anticipated, and where we end up just before Christmas with the plan becoming public.
I think that Councillor Vandervis, that to accuse various parties of doing this to get it before Christmas and then saying that you don't think it was deliberate is a contradiction. Sit down, please. Is a contradiction. And I think that criticism, or assuming that the delay is caused by either incompetence or laziness, is profoundly ignorant on anyone's part. I happen to know that both the commissioners and the staff involved in this have been doing horrendous hours, 60 hours a week, right through weekends, 4 weeks, getting this done. I happen to know that's for the case for both the commissioners and the staff, and it would be idiotic to cut short a process just to tailor it into what we predicted it was going to be, and then have an inferior, flawed product at the end. It would be irresponsible and it would be stupid. So, with that, who moved this? Councillor Hawkins, do you wish to exercise your right of reply? So that's fine, thank you. I'm therefore going to put this. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No, recorded.
Could you record that for Councillor Vandervis? Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Okay. Item 20, remuneration of elected members. Welcome, Ms. Bodecker. Now, I understand both you and the acting CEO may speak to this. So do you wish to preface it with any comments, or do you just want to go straight to questions?
Straight to questions, thank
Questions.
you.
Right, questions, councillors. Any questions? Well, we'll wait until. Doesn't appear to be any questions. Right, would someone like to move the resolution? Move Councillor Staines, second Councillor Wilson. Any discussion? There is none. I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Well, that was short and sweet. Right, on to item 21, proposed leases of parts of parks and recreation land to various lessees. Mr Graham and Ms Ash. Oh, Mr West. Sorry? Right, okay, well, I'll hold that. Your second, all right. So, would you like to say anything first, or just go straight to questions? Right, questions, councillors? Very subdued and uninquisitive council today. So, would someone like to? You're moving, Councillor Wilson, second to Councillor Wiley. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Wilson? No. Right. Does anyone else wish to speak to it? Right.
Thank you to the staff for the great.
Right, I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. I think it is. And anyway, how can you ask that? Anyway, I'll move that the meeting move into confidential for the reasons outlined on the order paper. Second to Councillor Staines. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.